Today we'll be covering three things. Your handouts do outline that. It's the budget process. I'm assuming that everybody here knows how to read a financial statement and that you have a general understanding of what the function of a budget is. So we're not going to go over that. But there is a process, and it can be very intimidating when you have volunteer members on your board of directors who've never done a budget even at home, and suddenly they're confronted with having to do a budget for community association, which is for a lot of other people. They really don't know where to start. So we will be talking to you about that and giving you some ideas of ways that you can introduce other board members to the budget process. Also, to know why and how it's a good idea to have other owners involved in the budget process. I would say that most of the boards of directors that we manage do the budget themselves. That is, they take the manager's proposal, the manager's budget draft, and that's part of our job, to provide you with an idea of what we think your budget should be. And then the board takes that and works with that, and then from that creates a final budget, and that becomes the planning document for the association for the future year. This is not always the way it has to be. Many times you have some talent in your community associations that you can utilize to help you with the budget. People who like numbers and are good at numbers. You've got CPAs, you maybe have somebody who's a math teacher. People who also you may have specialists whose services you may be using as you plan. For example, if you're an association that has a large entrance, and the entrance is a bridge over a railroad track. We have a community like that. The entrance is it's a monument over a railroad track, and they've got a bridge and all this stuff. And let's just say that association decided that they were going to redo that entrance. Well, they would want to have the input of somebody who knew about what that was going to cost, and it would be a good idea to have somebody like that on your budget committee, so that as you're planning, maybe over the next couple of years, you'd have an idea of how much that's going to cost. So you're not always talking just about numbers people. Sometimes specialists who can come in and advise you so you can put some realistic numbers into your reserves and to your operating. We're also going to talk about involving your ownership. Keeping your ownership involved and aware of what you as board members are doing is so very important, and we talk about that just about every time we get together. In the budget especially, and we're going to give you some examples in writing, also in the meetings, to encourage people to be aware of the budget. I can't tell you how many people get mad. Usually they'll get mad sometime in the spring. I don't know why it's in the springtime, and they'll call. They're all upset about the fees, and maybe they've gotten a late fee. And you're now into the second quarter of a homeowners association. The pool isn't open yet. They don't see any benefit from it. And they call and they say, why should I pay $45 a quarter? I don't know what this money is going toward. That's why we send a budget. And your budget letter, which we're going to be talking about later, is going to tell people where that money is going, so that people are not just getting a piece of paper with a lot of numbers on it. They can understand what their fees are for. And keeping people abreast of all of that during the course of the year is very, very helpful for you. Makes your job easier. The few people who are complaining, the easier it's going to be for you to do your job. As I say, I'm assuming that you understand how to read your financial reports. We actually do a workshop on that, and that's going to be one of the ones that's going to be on the video. But you do need to understand and read your financial reports. Not just you. You are the leaders of the leaders. You've taken the trouble to come here and listen to somebody talk about what is a volunteer job for you for a little over an hour. But your other board members, make your other board members read those financial statements. If they don't understand them, we have some references for you. Every single board member does receive a packet from us when they go on the board of directors, and it tells them a lot of things about what their job is and so forth. And in there is a reference. They can take that, have a financial report, and actually go down line by line and completely understand what the basic financial report says. They really need to understand at least that basic. Somebody on the board should be able to understand the other information that we give to you every month. And that includes the general ledger, which shows the activity of the various accounts. It shows the detail of what the checks were written for. You may have board members who want to see who's paying and who isn't paying. We give you a delinquency report. We give you a prepay report, and a prepay report shows who is paid early. That's all that is. If I have an annual fee everybody has an annual fee. If we pay quarterly and I decide to pay a year in advance every December, I'm going to show as a prepaid person through the course of the year. And it's good for you to know when you're seeing the money coming in on the maintenance fee line, how much of that is current money and how much of it is actually prepaid, because you can actually get a wrong picture if you don't understand how to read that. So somebody on your board needs to understand those financial reports. You need to know what your financial condition is. If you don't, it's going to be very difficult for you to create a budget. That's why you're going to have a lot of people working on it, because we're going to assume that in most cases it's rare that one person has all of that knowledge. If you have a board of directors where nobody is comfortable with money, then, or numbers, I should say, we're all comfortable with money. If you're not comfortable with numbers, then maybe you could split it up and have one person just say, look at the balance sheet and the operating, another person gets to understand what the general ledger, another person concentrates on the delinquency reports. Do it that way, but you really need to understand your financial reports. As a board, you are listing your needs and your goals. And your needs and your wants are not always the same thing. They may be. But I live at a community association that has a pool. And so there is pool furniture. I may use the pool all the time and consider it an absolute necessity that the association get new furniture. I consider that a need. The board of directors may consider that a want. That's just something that they would like to have. That's on their wish list because they have other things that have to be done, and also they consider that that pool furniture is going to last another year or two. If you have your ear to the ground, if you're allowing the owners to communicate with you, if you're letting your manager tell you the things that he or she is hearing when people call or when they're out in the community, you will get to know what the ownership thinks. If I'm in the minority and I'm the only one who thinks that the pool furniture needs to be replaced, that's not a deal. But if most of the owners who use the pool think that that furniture needs to be tossed and replaced, and it should happen next year, the board of directors needs to be aware of that so that they can include that in their budget consideration. You may have, use the example of the entrance. We have a couple of associations who are talking about building playgrounds where they don't have any or where they do have one and they want two. We have associations that want to upgrade their playgrounds. They're too small, they're too old, they're outdated. Is that going to be on the wish list, or is that going to be something that they need to do? And the reason that you need to understand how to distinguish those is that you want to know where you're going to put those in the budget. Are you going to put the playground in as an operating item and definitely do it in 2013? Or are you going to reserve for it and say it's something we want to do way down in the future and we're going to start saving for it by putting some money into the reserves? You can see the difference. You can see the difference. Maybe you're putting the same money aside, but chances are you're not. If you're putting it in the operating line, that suggests that you expect to be doing the work and paying for it next year. That means all of it. If you say, we think we're going to do this in 5 years, or we're going to do it even in 2 years, we're going to start saving for it, well, obviously, you don't have to put that much money in the budget for 2013 because you'll be adding to that over a couple of years. So it's a good distinction. First of all, you want to know what your owners are thinking, distinguish needs and wants, figuring out whether you're going to put it in operating or whether you're going to put it into reserves. You're going to set a budget calendar, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. This makes the process easier. I'm a great believer in calendars, and your managers all have budget calendars. They've listed the communities that they manage, and they have some goals. They may not meet the goals, but they're the goals anyway. They expect to get your budget draft to you by a certain date with some kind of an explanatory memorandum. They're expecting feedback from the board of directors in terms of an approved budget by a certain date. They expect to get that approved budget to our accounting department so that can be uploaded by a certain date. And then there's another goal date for getting the information to the owners. That is, what is the budget going to be for 2013? And then, of course, we mail that out to the owners. You as a board will have a little bit different calendar, and I will describe that a little bit later. During the course of the year, you need to be thinking about the budget. This is budget season. We keep saying that. I think that's why there are so many people here. But actually, some of your managers started their budgets in June. And there are a few managers here who have had their boards of directors approve budgets, even if the budgets involved increases in fees. This is August. Think about that. Now that's because there is so much communication among the board members, so much communication between the manager and the board members, and I would say an awareness of what the needs are, that they didn't have to procrastinate. It's done. They have gone through the draft, they have made their recommendations, and they have a budget for 2013. You're going to say, well, this is August. A lot can happen between August and December. Well, that's true. A lot can happen between November and December. But your budget is a planning document. If your bottom line number is realistic, if the fee income that you are planning is going to match the money that you're either going to be expending or saving, if you have to make a few adjustments during the year and you find that you over budgeted for pool and you under budgeted for the security system for the gate, that's okay. Those can change during the year. The point of it is you've got a good, strong bottom line. You know what your fee income needs to be to pay your current bills and to save for what you need and you want to do in future years. This is your budget calendar. First of all, I mentioned that most boards are the budget committee, but they may not be. So start thinking about who it is who is going to be working on your budget for 2013. And you might want to just get a piece of paper and pencil and write that down as we're talking this afternoon. Who is it who's going to be working on it? It could be that not all the board members are interested. And that does happen. Some people are just absolutely afraid of numbers or just don't like them. And it may be that there'll be just 3 board members out of 7 who are going to work on the budget. Well, maybe that's the time to think about some other owners whom you would like to engage in that process. Write that down, talk to the other board members, and get some determination of that so that you know who is going to be working on the committee. Now you have somebody responsible for that. The next thing that will happen is that the manager will be giving you, if they haven't already, the manager will be giving you a budget draft. Now, we as managers will give you pretty much an historical budget. That is one that is based on the history of your community, plus what we've been listening to you say all year long. If you might have made a comment a couple of months ago at a board meeting that, well, we really need to put a little bit of money extra aside because we want to paint the inside of the clubhouse, and that's something that we didn't have money to do this year. The manager might have just made a note of that, and so in the budget that he or she provided you, they've got something in there and say, you'll see that the painting budget is a little bit higher because you had mentioned that you wanted to be able to paint the inside of the clubhouse. So that's in there. So they're going to give that to you. They'll have some kind of a memo, maybe very short, maybe very long, explaining the budget draft to you. And then the ball is in your court. Now the managers spent a lot of time on this. They're looking at how the money has been spent during the course of the year. Again, the adjustments, you found out you spent more on one thing than another to make the budget as realistic as possible. And then it's up to you and your committee to decide what you want to do with that budget. Our job is to be realistic. That is, we are going to be saying to you what we believe you need in order to pay your bills and save in 2013. And it could be, for many of you, that that's going to be a recommendation for a fee increase. You may choose not to do that. And if you choose not to do that, that's your call. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but you do need to remember that it's your responsibility to see to it that those bills are paid and that there's enough money for something in the future. And it's something that's very, very difficult. It's difficult for you to do because they're your neighbors. I mean, a lot of times you're thinking, well, I can handle the extra $2 or $3 a month, but I've got somebody down the street who may not be able to do that because they're retired or, I don't know, had an illness in the family or whatever it is, and it's usually not $2 or $3. But that's not what you need to be concerned about. You need to be concerned about what's best for the community. That is your job, even though you're not getting paid for it. That is your job. And I have seen boards who have come back and said, you know what, manager, we're going to raise it even more than you suggested because there is this that we want to do, or there is that we want to do. We have one association, and they're represented here today, and they discovered that there was a possibility that they could reduce their water expenses considerably by digging for wells. And it's a large community. And there was no money in the budget for this at all. Absolutely flat out no money. Nothing in the reserves. The reserves are kind of sacrosanct. They have things where the reserve money is going to go, and certainly the fees weren't going to pay for that. So the board of directors looked into it. They got some prices for well exploration, very good, reasonable information that they communicated with the owners, and they passed a special assessment. It's interesting. They didn't put it in the budget because it actually happened. They were thinking about it at budget time, and they said, well, let's just do the budget, kind of worry about it later, actually the beginning of this year. That's what they did. And then they sent a letter to people and said there was a special assessment. Because they had done such research, even at the budget stage, they'd made that decision to special assess. It wasn't a large amount of money. I don't consider it a large amount of money, do you? It was $25, wasn't it? Yeah. So a year, just like one $25 thing. So it wasn't a deal. Waited till after the holidays, gave all the owners the information, and incredibly, they had very, very wide support. We had another association that had an opportunity to purchase a piece of property next to it. They otherwise they'd be pretty much not be able to take their garbage out. And so this is a condominium property right in Nashville. And so this happened, and there was, again, no way they were going to be able to increase their budget to purchase this piece of property, and they had to special assess. But they knew about this at budget time. They knew about it. They kept the owners informed, and they said, we're going to work on these numbers, and sometime in 2012 you're going to get a pretty big bill to buy this lot. And by the time it happened, they had complete support. Everybody but one person supported it. And that was, as I recall, it was an out-of-town owner. Is that right? An out-of-town owner. Once that owner was explained, they had 100% support of a special assessment. The range was $1,600 to $4,000. Was it something like that, Alicia? $16,000 special assessment, 100% support, communication. The owners knew what they were doing. That is part of the budget process. It's not just the budget, but it's also thinking about those things that may not fit into the budget as a line where you're going to separate it out as a special assessment. As a rule, we would say that special assessments are not the first choice. But in those two cases, you can see for impact on the budget, the fact that they were one-time expenses. They would have certainly, in the case of that condominium property that was buying the lot, it would have distorted the budget to just say, okay, everybody's fee is going to increase $16,000 for 1 year. I mean, that's just, so, it kind of makes sense. But actually, we've seen that done too. But you have to be thinking about that. Oh, this isn't a budget item. What else? Is a special assessment reasonable? If it is, you're going to do your homework, be prepared, and communicate with the owners. You definitely want the owners on board for whatever you do. You're spending their money, and they know it. They know it very, very well. Keep them informed. You have a handout there about the budget committee. If you choose to involve owners in the committee who are not members of the board, we suggest that the lead person be your treasurer. That's probably the numbers person on your board of directors. And that means that person will be the liaison between the board of directors and the committee, and it will serve as the lead person, just as I say. If you name this committee, you need to give them a task. Don't just say, you're the budget committee, here's the manager's recommendation, give us something in 30 days. You need to be specific. If you have that list of needs and wants, that committee needs to know what that is. What is it that you have been thinking about doing? What is it that you'd like to see in that budget that's going to help you build that extra playground? They're not mind readers. Tell the committee, these are the parameters, this is what we would like to do. We consider that a fee increase of maybe 1% or 2% is reasonable. Work within those parameters because we think we can sell it and we can collect it. We want to have a detailed budget from you on a particular date, budget draft to the board of directors with a written explanation. Your committee is doing this, and then the board will be the ultimate decider. So just with any committee, task them, be specific, give them some goal dates. And then, of course, at the end, thank them very much for their time because they're probably going to spend a lot of time on this. Offer them the services of the manager. Many times the committee members who are not board members haven't really been involved in your budget before. We have the ability to give them access to the financial reports. If you are, I would say most associations, I'm just looking around, I think most associations now do make at least part of your financial reports available to the owners on the website. Your budget committee needs to have access to all of your financial reports, all of them. They need to see the not the delinquencies, they need to see the delinquency dollar amount, and they need to see the general ledger, all of the check registers. They need to see all that to really get an idea of your financial activity. We can set it up so that they have temporary access just to that information. And I think a lot of people don't know that, but it's a wonderful tool. We just call them committee. They can do that. When the committee's role is finished, we just take them off and they go back to being regular homeowners. But they give them the tools that they need so that they can give you an intelligent budget. You don't want to have somebody spend a month on something and give you something that is completely unrealistic, because in that case, you've just wasted a month and the clock is ticking. The goal in terms of the calendar is to have your budget completed well before Thanksgiving. If you are increasing your fees as a courtesy, even if it is not included as a requirement in your documents, we need to get the owners a letter telling them about the fee increase within no later than a month before the beginning of the fiscal year. You've got to give people a chance to plan. That means that they should have something before the 1st of December. Really, we try to do it before Thanksgiving, because once you hit Thanksgiving, as we all know, it's really, really busy. People are buying Christmas gifts, holiday gifts, birthdays and anniversaries continue to go on, and they need to be able to budget, and particularly if you're doing an increase. Now, even if you're not doing an increase, you should meet that goal, so that everybody in your community takes it for granted that they're going to get a letter every year. Even if you're giving them good news, meet that deadline, so that when that letter does finally come and there's going to be a big increase for some reason, they're not dreading it. They don't say, oh, the only time I ever hear from the board of directors is when they have bad news, they want more money from me. No, you need to be communicating with them in a letter every year. Doesn't have to be long. This is what we've done. This is how we spent your money. This is your budget for the next year. If you have a goal of getting that, we have a goal of getting it out by December. We have a goal of getting your approvals by Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the 22nd of November this year. It's as early as it can be, 4th Thursday of November. So you can see we're running out of time. This is October, so we have September, October. We've got about 2.5 months to put together a budget. So you want to get your committee, task your committee, and your committee is going to be looking at the financial condition of the association. They're going to be looking at the balance sheet. They're going to see how the association is spending money, look at the operating statement, and they're going to look at delinquencies. As I say, you may not want to share the names, but they need to know if delinquencies are a deal at your community. If they are, it's recommended that you have something in your budget in some way to compensate you for that, or you are going to come up short at the end of the year. And this happens over and over again. If you have more than 10% of your owners who are late and simply not paying, serious delinquencies, that's 10% of the money that you're expecting to spend, that you budgeted to spend, that you don't have. That's going to make or break you. I often use the example of where I live. They had high delinquency for a while, and that literally did put them behind their maintenance plans 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years for a condominium property. They were put behind just because of the delinquencies. Good board of directors, very careful about the way they spent the money, nothing outstanding. We had a couple things come their way which also contributed to that. So if you've got delinquencies, how are you going to treat a delinquency? What is your committee going to do, if it's you or if it's somebody else? They're going to look at those delinquencies and they're going to show it you could show it as bad debt, but that scares everybody. All the owners see bad debt and they think, oh, that's terrible, what is that? But better to call it something like contingency. So if you have a large, for example, you have a foreclosure and you have lost $1,000, I mean, they absolutely just lost that, you can charge that against contingency. It becomes a budgeted item. That means that you still have some money left for the other things that you're doing. You can call it bad debt, but some people put it in the reserve and some people put it in operating, and they draw from it. But it actually, you can see how that makes a difference. It's like you when you're saving. If you're saving for a new car and you're putting so much money aside every paycheck, putting it aside and putting it aside and putting it aside. Oh, I know, this is what I can do. And then all of a sudden something happens to the existing car that has to be fixed and you haven't budgeted for that. That's going to affect your savings for the car. Well, it also is going to, or it's going to affect the money that you have to go out and maybe have dinner or whatever it is that you want to do. So if you budget for that, if you say, I know there's a chance that something's going to go wrong with the car this year, part of my budget is going to put in $500 for car repairs. That's the same thing as saying there is a likely chance, given the history in my community, that at least one home is going to be foreclosed upon, and we tend to lose $1,000 a year. Put that in there. That's your cushion, so that you can pay for everything else that you want to do. And let your committee know about that. The manager can help you with that. They need to understand what they're looking at and also the latitude that they have as they're preparing your budget. They will look at your current financial condition. Rick Etherly and I were talking about pro forma budgets yesterday. Some associations like to project, and if you're projecting out a lot, if you say 2013 through 2017, I think that works out to 5 years, that you want to know what the association is going to look like in 5 years. You may have someone in your association who will create a pro forma budget. And then what that's doing is looking at what the typical expenses will be through the years, possibly allowing for some inflation, possibly allowing for some standard repair, maintenance type things. But not allowing for anything really, really big. Not allowing for anything really, really big. But it gives you an idea of where your fees are going to go, and it's an interesting exercise that most of us don't do. Our manager is going to be giving you a budget that's going to compare the proposal for 2013 with what's been happening year to date in 2012, and also where you expect it to be in 2012, which actually is quite useful. Don't usually go beyond the next year, but in some cases, particularly larger communities with very complex operations, you get some of the high rises, for example, where you have a lot of staffing, where you have some very complicated HVAC systems and fire alarm systems. When you get large communities that have very big amenity centers with tennis courts and maybe more than one pool and a lot of walking trails and all that stuff, if you kind of know where your regular fees are going to go, and then you start plugging in some of these reserves, you get an idea of the future, and it does help you zero in on the current year as well. So that's part of your current financial list, where you are now, where you want to be next year, which is an interesting exercise when you think about it. When if anybody here is saving for somebody's college, you've got, I forget the name of the plan, but there are a couple different plans. There's some you just throw money in the bank, and you're paying for the grandchild's college, and starting with the first birthday, you just keep adding and adding and adding. And there's an expectation that by the time they turn 19 or 18 or whenever you think they're going to go to college, that there will be a certain percentage of that child's tuition in the bank for them, which is a wonderful thing. The reason that you know that is that you have a goal date, you have that age of 18 or 19 or whatever it is, and so you figured out what the dollar amount is that you're going to put aside each year. You may increase that. If you look at that every year, you may read in the paper that tuitions are going up. That's a surprise. And you may say, my intention had been to be able to pay for the first semester of the first year of my grandchild's college. And I can see now that that's not going to do that. So I'm going to start adjusting that. If you're doing that kind of projection, of pro forma thing that we're talking about, you get to look at more than the current year, and you might actually start putting more into reserves. Or you might start allocating things a little bit differently, or even creating some different line items that you hadn't thought about creating before, just by looking to the future, things that you don't have now. You don't have a playground now, you're going to build one next year. Guess what? You're going to have playground expenses, you're going to have mulch to put in, you're going to have painting to do and just upgrades to do and so forth. So thinking ahead is very useful. Deferred maintenance implications, again using where I live as an example. Because of those delinquencies and a couple of really bad water leaks and a couple of foundation problems, as I say, they were years and years behind. And what happened was that they weren't just behind. If they had budgeted $20,000 a year for paint and wood repair 5 years ago, that's not going to grab it anymore because it continued to deteriorate. They didn't have the money that wood just doesn't stop after 5 years. The paint comes off, the wood starts to rot, and you have more rotted wood than you would have if you had done it on time. If you have a lot of deferred maintenance, whatever it is, it may be your walking trails, it may be your entrance, your irrigation system, it could be your roof. You have things that have been neglected. and you had what you considered to be a good, reasonable reserve amount for that you were putting aside, or you were putting something in your budget as an operating amount, you can expect that that number is going to be low because it was deferred. As I say, that stuff doesn't stop. If you were going to surface your pool 3 years ago and you didn't bother to do that, you are still going to have to resurface it, but in that case your materials may be more expensive. If you were going to pave and you deferred, if you were going to roof and you deferred, I can tell you it's more expensive because the materials are high. So when you're looking at the current situation and you're looking at your consideration and you're looking at your deferred maintenance, remember that not only are things continuing to deteriorate, the cost of doing the job is going to be higher. The potholes that you have now you didn't have before. Cutting out and filling that pothole in addition to completely resealing could cost you several $1,000s more than you would have had to pay had you done a couple years ago, which leads me to something else. Don't defer maintenance if you can possibly avoid it. As you're looking at the future, be realistic in that budget so that you don't get stuck with that, because you end up spending more money. I can tell you oil is not going to go down to where it was 10 years ago. You know, if it's just not. So you had a paving bid, and Brick had a really big one, and I don't know, what did that go up by? It was, I know at one time when I was managing that community it was like $100,000, and you paid almost $3, didn't you? No.
No, that was with the drainage.
Drainage. Well, see,
also.
yeah.
They paid nearly
$240,000, and we used to budget at the $100,000 and figured we'd have money left over. And it was the same, you know, in just like 8 or 10 years. That wasn't deferred. That was really planned. But so look at it now. Say, do I really want to put this off another year? Is it going to cost us more? Does that really make sense? Should we put it in now, pull the money out of reserves, and do a little bit of shuffling there so that we can get this done so it's not going to cost us money more? Because as I say, oil is a good example. Anybody who deferred paving in the last 3 years has really suffered for that. So let your budget committee know what you've been thinking and talk about it among yourselves and discuss with the manager. We have a lot of managers with a lot of resources. We talk to a lot of contractors, and we have a lot of experiences with different things that have happened, so we may be able to help you plug in a number for that and help your committee. You as board members, even if you have a committee, you as board members will be making the decisions. So your understanding of all of these things is really going to help the process, so that you don't want to get that proposal back. You don't want to get it even from the manager if you're doing it yourselves and sit on it. You can't sit on it. You've got to get together as a committee, meet at least once. Even if it's just the board of directors, you have a community that doesn't have any amenities. I think there might be somebody here. Yeah, there is. That you don't have any amenities and you think this is really straightforward. The manager gives me my budget and gives us our budget in September. We'll meet in October and we will pass the budget. Don't do that. Get together as a committee and talk about nothing but those numbers. It's incredible what you will discover. It's absolutely incredible. You learn a lot about what's happening in the community, and you also learn about what needs to be done and what you want to be done, and then make sure that those numbers are realistic. It's just amazing to me how many people do not take that budget process seriously. Obviously you do because you're here, but you're going to be going back and selling it to your other board members, and I know that's sometimes a difficult sell. We'll try to help you with that. Not your job. Not your job to worry about what another association is charging for fees. It is not your job. Who cares? It's a completely different community. You may have 2 communities next to each other with no amenities, 2 entrances, and the same number of homes. They both have 230 homes. I will tell you their budgets will be different because the amount of common area is different. It's very likely that even though they both have 2 entrances, that their irrigation needs are different. They may have a higher demand for water because of the plantings that they put in. You may have common areas that are retention areas and detention areas that are very expensive to maintain. You may have some hard-to-get areas or some other common areas that require a lot of weed eating because you can't get a machine in there, whereas the other association can just mow the whole thing. So don't say, oh, their fee is, I don't know, we'll just make up a number. Their fee is $100 a quarter. We can't put ours above $100 a quarter because we won't be competitive. And when somebody in our community sells, they won't be able to sell. $100 a quarter difference. We're talking about $25 a difference. Think of the dollars here. It's probably talking about maybe a $400,000 house, and somebody's going to quibble about $100 a year in additional association fees. That person doesn't need to live in your community because you're spending more than they are for a reason. You either have to because you have very demanding common areas, or you want to because you want a higher quality than maybe this neighboring community has. Don't be embarrassed to make people pay for that. So don't get hooked into that. Well, why? We have a person in the neighborhood, and they're a realtor, and they're going to do the MLS, and they're going to do a comp for us, and they also know people who live. So everybody's looking around because almost everybody's done it, and we're going to look at these people, and then we're going to talk to our friends and find out their association fees, and then we're going to stay competitive for our association fee. Most of the time, the dollar amount is so small. You're laboring spending all this trouble on this, and somehow your place is going to suffer because if you keep to that, you will be like them. And what you didn't move there, you moved to where you are, and there's a reason for that. So think about that. With the condominiums, it's no way you can compare. Some condominiums nowadays don't include water. They don't include insurance. In some cases, the association is responsible for a lot less than they are in other associations. Some places have clubhouses. All of these things are variables. You can't just say, well, it's the same zip code and we're the same. They're not. Don't get hooked on that. The other one, as I told you before, we all have people on limited income. I'm an employee. I work. I am on limited income. I am not. There is nobody in this room who is on unlimited income. Nobody, right? There is a limit to our income. Some people are able to define that, and they'd be able to tell you in a year in advance what their income is in because they're on pensions, which many of us will never have from a business, and they're on Social Security. But you know what? They're living in their community, your community, because they like it there. Right? They don't feel trapped. There's nobody in here who's in a community where somebody feels, oh, I can't get out of this community. I really want to. Can't. This place is terrible. No, you are living in nice places. People want to live there, and they want to maintain that standard. And they will pay that extra money. They look at it as an investment, especially retired people, which are the ones that they usually talk about. I can't increase that because Mary Newkirk lives next to me, and she's a retired lady, really nice lady, and I know she couldn't afford it. That's probably the first one who's going to write the check for her next month's fee when the fee increases, because she loves the place, and she understands that she is getting some value for that fee. And also, the board of directors has communicated to her why this fee is necessary. So that's not on your handout, but it's not your job. And tell people that. You'll have people, they will say it, and I'm seeing people do that. They will do that. But it's not really what you're about. You're proud of the place you live in. You obviously care about it, or you wouldn't be here. You certainly wouldn't be serving on your boards of directors. Communicate that to your owners. Communicate it in the budget that you give them, which is a realistic expectation of where you expect their money to go next year. It's your money too, which a lot of them forget. And you can always remind people of that too. It's not as though there are 100 people, 120 people living in my community and only 119 are going to get this fee increase. No, you're going to pay it too. And remind people of that. Let them know you're being very, very responsible in this. You're not being unfair. You're not being frivolous. I don't think, of other managers that we've met across the country, I have never heard a manager say, this board raises its fees unreasonably every year. How can they wouldn't stay in office. They'd be booted out. Of course they don't do that because they don't want to do that. And if owners think about that, that's just a matter of communicating to them as well as you can why you're doing it, so that you're comfortable with the increase, make them comfortable with the increase. I've already talked about this. Saving for the future, talking about some tennis court. That's a thing. Are you going to keep your tennis court or not? Sometimes that's the question. Do you want to increase the size of it? Does it need to be fenced? If you don't have a tennis court, is it going to give you value? All those things that we talked about several months ago when we were talking about this strategic planning for the board. This is the time that you're going to put that down and give it assign it a dollar value, and present it to the other board members. And in the course of your discussions with the board, you may discover that you don't all agree, and it could be that something that will be put aside. But give it a shot. That's the time that you look at this stuff. Is it really realistic? A very common concern in community associations, regardless of the type, is street lighting. For most of us, unfortunately, the city, the state, the county, whoever, they're not going to put in the street lights. We don't have enough light. We're going to be the ones to pay for it in some way. And especially if there are no lights, that is a really big deal for some people. And they can, and I know we have one association that's going through this now. So they have a developer who hasn't put this in. We don't know if the developers go with the lights in or not. Got a whole section that's completely dark. I mean, they can probably just do wonderful stargazing because they don't even get reflected light. And they consider this unsafe. So what is the board going to do about that? That's really hard. Now, those people consider that a necessity, that absolute necessity. The board has to decide, is this a necessity? Are we going to put this into the budget and somehow find money for this? Or are we going to consider it just something that we are going to maybe save for ultimately, and in 10 years we'll have enough money to be able to put streetlights there? That's a big decision. And that's a very real example, because I spoke to a lady just recently who's absolutely passionate about the issue of streetlights. There are different ways to handle it. In this particular case, this board of directors has done an incredible amount of research, and they know what it will cost. And they also know the impact that it would be on people's budgets, and I think they suspect that a lot of people aren't willing to pay for it. So there's the board of directors, and their job this year is going to be to communicate that somehow. But that's the kind of thing that this is the best time. You've got the ideas, you've got the wants, and then you're the decision makers. Whatever you say goes. You are the decision makers, and then communicate it. And in some cases, it will be a no. It will be no. Streetlights do not make sense. We need to wait and see what this developer does. We need to hope that the city will attach the bond and put in the streetlights, whatever. We simply cannot afford that. So it's not always yeses and throwing it in there. Sometimes it's taking it out, understanding what you can do, and then explaining it, and then just moving on to the next item. Selling the budget, which is what we've been talking about the whole time. I'm experimenting with this thing, and it isn't as good as the other one. There's one where that comes in automatically, and that doesn't work with this. But you're really selling the budget all year long. All year long. You're looking at your financial statements every month. If you have a newsletter, say something about in the newsletter. Just want to let you know this is our current balance. Did you know that we had to do major pool renovations this year and it cost us $7,000? The association is very pleased to announce that next year, we've just gotten some prices, and next year we're going to be able to fence all the way along the main road, and that's going to cost us $7,000. Or $8,000 or whatever it is. The board of directors has looked at the pricing of fencing along the road and has determined that there are not enough funds this year. And so the next budget will show that a reserve item, and so that in 2014 we will be able to install this fence. That's the kind of thing you do through the year. Through the year. Your manager can help you with that. As I've said before, we've got our staff here, our assistants are wonderful at doing newsletters, so if you want it to be prettied up, they can find things to give it color and pictures and all that business. But the content is important, and that is news. That is news in a newsletter, not be sure to curb your pets. That's not news, that's a rule. News is what you've done with the money, what you've been thinking about doing with the money, what you can do in the future. So that when that budget letter comes, which is everything all in one place, they're already used to seeing this. Another way to communicate, one of my favorites, because I've seen it work in this association for over 30 years, this association meets almost monthly. It's a condominium property, and it's about 35 years old, I guess. And they, every month, get the minutes to the owners. Every month. They deliver them. There's somebody who delivers those minutes. So budget season is a no-brainer, because everybody's been reading. They know what the financial condition is every month. They know about any unusual expenses. They know everything. And that budget letter and that budget, they kind of know. They probably know now whether they're going to get an increase in 2013. That's another way to do it, by sharing the minutes of your meeting. Another way is to post at least part of your financial report on the website. That would be the budget, the balance sheet, which of course tells you how much money you have, and also shows debts, and also your operating statement. And as you know, the operating statement has a second sheet now, which I love, which shows not just the current month and then the year to date, but it also shows a breakdown of every single month, and then the budgeted, and then the total amount that was spent in that year. So you've got 3 pieces of paper that can answer an incredible number of questions. So put that up, give us permission to put that information just for your homeowners, not for the general public. And also, and here's the key, tell people this stuff is out there. There are so many people, the boards have done that, and they forgot to tell the owners that the information is out there for them to see. So in your newsletter or in your communication, if you don't do newsletters, tell them at the annual meeting. Guess what? Every month we put out our financial statement for you to see, and this is where you can find it on the website. Answers a lot of questions. What you're doing, you're getting buy-in. You're getting the owners to understand what you're doing. The other thing, you'll find people are more supportive of you because they understand. They'll be certainly more appreciative of all the work that you do, which is an incredible amount of work. We all know that. And next, when you want to do something, even if it's something new, you have built up such trust with always having been open about the bottom line, the financial part, that you will very likely find support. That community that had the well, it was kind of interesting. They worked really hard on communication for the last couple of years, and they're still building and building and building, but I firmly believe that part of the reason that they were able to get that money for that well exploration was that they had communicated and that people could see that there was something coming in. And obviously a saving, because in this particular case, if these wells work out, their bills will actually decrease because, of course, they won't have to pay for the water. So you're involving the owners by keeping them informed. If you encounter an owner who is challenging what you're doing, they have great ideas. Some of them are great ideas. Invite them to participate in the budget committee. They may approach you in April and say, well, it's too late for this year, but we're going to have a budget committee. We would love to have you join that committee. And then have somebody give them a call in about August and say, we're going to be getting this committee together, and we'd love to have you participate. Now, if they participate, great. If they don't participate, well, then that's it. It's like not voting. They could say, well, we gave you the opportunity, but you've done what you can to involve them in the process. And the word gets out that you are inclusive in your decision making. And remembering that money is really, really important because it's other people's money, regardless of the dollar amount. The annual meeting is a very good time to communicate with the owners. There's this great big long list of stuff that we can talk about at the annual meeting. It doesn't have to be detailed, but at least tell the owners where you are today. This is how much money we have in the bank. At least tell them that. Now, I'm telling you, if it's over couple $100,000, a lot of people will think that that's too much. So for a lot of you, you won't want to stop there. You might want to say that half of that is being saved because next year we're going to be required to install a new elevator, and that's going to take half of it because we're in a high-rise and the elevator's shot. And they've just told us it's so out of code, so we're going to have to replace it. Then they're going to say, oh boy, first they're going to say $200,000 is a lot too much. Then you're going to tell them about the elevator, half of it's going to the elevator, and they think, oh my, thank God, this is the greatest board in the whole world because they've saved for it, and I'm not going to get a special assessment. So use the annual meeting as an opportunity to talk about money. Some boards like to go in great detail. I personally, having been on both sides, actually all three places as the owner and the board member and manager, I don't like to sit there with the financial report and do every line. But I think it is a good idea to give the owners the most recent approved financial report, that is your monthly report. Again, just the balance sheet and the operating statements, and then just do some highlights. We have X number of dollars in the bank. Did you notice we have a developer loan under liabilities? A lot of people don't see that. And your developer loan can be tens of thousands of dollars, and that is a real liability that the association is going to have to pay off. People have to understand when they go into that budget, when they go over there, that's one of the things that you're going to be paying down, and which may or may not have interest. Or you may just have a regular bank loan because you've taken some money out to make an improvement or install sprinklers or fire safety system or whatever it is. But if you give those and then just say, here are the highlights, we're pretty much on target for the receipts. We thank everybody for paying on time. You'll notice that our operating, we're pretty much on target, and then we're saving this much. And that's probably all you have to do. Let them read the details when you get home, because you're covering a lot of other stuff. But if you're planning to do something, you've got that idea of the playground, fixing up the entrance, that's the time to throw out those feelers. See what kind of feedback you get back. If your annual meeting is early in the year, you have a lot of time to think about that. And if you're thinking about rehabbing your entrance and you find that everybody in the room is absolutely horrified, about ready to lynch you, it's probably something you don't want to include in your budget. And you probably don't even want to pay an engineer to do the preliminary studies. So sometimes mentioning your ideas to the owners and assigning a dollar amount, if you can, will be very helpful to you in your job. when you're doing this, and just another thing I repeat, you are making the job attractive to your kind of person. You want to make your volunteer job attractive to the other people in your community who you would like to see on the board of directors. And when it's kind of interesting because you tend to be more open when you think of that way, although some people may say there's nobody to ever take this job and all that stuff. But they would only be crazy. But you will not be on the board of directors forever. And if you have set a precedent of being responsible, of being prepared, of having budget committees, of being inclusive, of understanding the numbers, of using newsletters and annual meetings and anything you can to create your budget, and along with all the other good things you have, it will be easier for you to tap on your neighbor's shoulder and say, look, I can't do this anymore. This is going to be a bad year for me. I'm just personally not going to have the time. Would you serve on the board? You're more likely to be able to get them to say yes. And it's the groundwork that you're doing. I can't say how important that is, because we do see that all the time. When you communicate the final budget to the owners, and as I say, our goal, we really, really like to have them all back, actually before Thanksgiving, because we have to have them to the printer for the coupons and all that business. There should be a cover letter. And my preference, again, I was a board member, so I did it, but I think your best letter comes from the board. In some cases, I know you have the manager write the letter for you, and that's okay, but I think that the letter itself needs to come from the board. If the manager composes the letter for you, then the manager will typically consult with the president or the treasurer, usually the president, and then they will kind of be the ghostwriter, and then the letter will come from the board. But the reason for that is that it tells the owners that it's your budget. It's an owner's budget. It's not the manager's budget. It's your budget. You're the ones who made that decision. And that really, really helps. The other thing is that if you write it yourselves, if you're comfortable writing, or somebody on your board is, it just has that personal touch that most of us don't put into it. When we're writing it, we're the managers. It's going to be a very businesslike, it's not going to have like little warm and fuzzy stuff. We've got a couple of managers who are good at that. But in most cases, we're going to say, here is your budget. This is it, and here are the dollars, and this is the fee is increasing. Hope you have a happy new year. That's it. And and it's due January 1st. But you tend to say, well, everybody in the neighborhood we've really loved, and we spent some money on a fair, a street fair, and it was a great fun. That kind of thing you can add that just makes it more readable. Keep it short. Don't make it long. If it's more than a page, it's too long. I don't care how much you have to tell them. If it's that long, tell them to read you'll have the numbers attached anyway. Say, go read it. They will not read it. They won't read it. They won't read it. I can't say that enough. They will not read it because it's too much stuff. And then they say, you never told me what was in the budget. Nobody ever explained this to me. And they say, well, yeah, we did. We sent this letter. And they say, oh, I don't read that. It was 2 pages long. I don't have time to do that. I just threw it in the bin. So it's fine. So if you need to have it short, bullet points, bold, something that really punchy, just punchy. Get the highlights out there. That's it. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and then go on. Be positive in your budget letter. Again, you don't have to do this in a long. What's the history? The reason that we have to increase the fees is that we've spent $72,000 on water this year. It should have been $40,000. We had to completely deplete our reserves, and not only that, we have some major deferred maintenance that we have to take care of next year. We're going to have to raise your fees $25 a month. Okay, that's a statement. It's not negative, but it's a statement. You're telling them this is the history. If you've had a reserve study, that's your wonderful crutch. Because if you increase your fees because you're following the reserve study, you can say that. The board of directors is following the recommendations of the engineering company that provided our reserve study. They recommend an increase of 3% to stay online for reserves. In addition, we have determined that our fuel costs have increased, or our electricity costs have increased, and so for that and a couple of other things, we are increasing the budget another 1%. So you will see that your fee has increased 4%. So you've got your history, and you've got an explanation, and you've also used the reserve study. It may be that you're only going to increase the fee according to the recommendations of the reserve study, but chances are, the way prices are going now, you're going to have something in that operating line that's going to go up as well. And certainly utilities are at the top of the list. And actually, if you're gas, you're kind of lucky, but I can't think of anybody where that's offsetting all the other expenses that are going up. Your grounds care companies, when you're renegotiating your contracts, you're seeing a lot of them increase because, particularly grounds care people, their cost is gas and people. And of course, the gas for those machines, the price keeps going up. So you'll see some changes, and it could be that that's how you'll have to adjust your budget accordingly. And by the way, I didn't say this, but your manager is also going out and talking to your vendors. So those numbers that they're putting down are not guesswork. Many times they're calling utilities to find out if the gas company is expecting a rate increase, or if the water company is expecting a rate increase, and that will be in your budget letter. So we're not just looking at the history. We're also doing some research to give you some realistic numbers. Is it a vendor that you've been working for a long time? Is he pretty much holding his prices with everybody, or is this the year that he said, I can't do this anymore, I'm going to have to increase everybody by 3%, insurance, another thing. Those are the things your manager is going to be telling you. It'll be up to you to decide if you want to take the chance and not follow that recommendation, or if you want to do it and explain it to the owner. And if you are saving for something, give people some goals. Tell them that you expect to do such and such in 2013 and such in 2014. The money for the playground, we will have it in 2014. It will take us 2 years to save that, or maybe 2015 or whatever it is. So that people, they see not that you're saving. If you just say you're putting it into reserves, a lot of people, we don't use the term reserves in our own personal finances. At least I've never spoken to anybody who does. We generally have savings. We have saved the money. That's what it is. We are saving the money for a playground. It will take us 2 years. Very clear, very positive. So we expect that in the spring of 2015, our children will be able to play on new playground equipment. And we'll be very proud of that. And maybe we'll even celebrate with a party. I don't know what you're going to say. But whatever it is, keep it positive. Whatever you say, and sometimes we didn't have enough money to pay the water bill without robbing the reserves, can be said in a different way, which is it exceeded our expectations or our budgeted amount due to the water breaks, and so we borrowed from reserves and consequently need more money. There's a way of saying it that's positive. Try to keep the knots out of there. But that cover letter is very important, and I can't emphasize that enough. And I know a lot of people don't like writing letters, but it's worth it. Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very, very much. We hope to see you again.